Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today, I have the pleasure of Ian Moore on the show. Good morning to you, Ian.
Morning, Julian. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to see you. It's been a few weeks since I've sort of caught up with you. You are the founder and MD of Logical Associates, a HR provider to SMEs covering people management practices from employment law, policy and contractual employee engagement and development, and keeping at the forefront of employment legislation, good practice and business governance. And today, we're going to be exploring something I think is quite needed right now with companies, is how to ensure we can attract the best talents to your business in a candidate sort of short market. So before we get into that conversation, Ian, what do you love about what you do?
That's a great question. I think it differs by day, which is probably a little bit of a cop-out answer. But it's true. It's all about, fundamentally, it's about helping businesses treat their people better. And by doing that, they get more out of them. They get more productivity. They have more engagement. They have more loyalty. And they're good places to work. So for me, it's about enabling businesses to get the best out of the people that they employ, because fundamentally that's the biggest cost most organizations have. So if you don't treat your people in the right way and develop them, then you effectively are losing money before you start. So that is what I really enjoy. And then every day is slightly different. So whether it's going to see a customer, whether it's going to do something like this, I get a kick out of lots of different things, but I think fundamentally it's that helping organizations become better.
And you're very people centric, and it's all about the people. And that sounds really obvious from a HR point of view, but I don't think it always is sometimes. And I think it's important to really focus on people, because as much as we can have great strategies, can't we, in businesses, if you don't have the right people in the right place, motivated, engaged, all that sort of stuff, then you won't deliver any strategy and ultimately grow and develop your business going forward. And I think that's really important and often forgotten about. And I think, my HR experience is almost you came as the emergency when things were all going wrong, and I know you're a believer in being more proactive as a HR professional.
Yeah, and I think that's historically where HR is. It comes in at the last minute to fix the problem that has been created. But where we're seeing it now, forward-facing organisations, forward-thinking organisations are including HR earlier and being part of the business strategy, which is great. So as much as the automation and AI, and I'm sure we may touch on some of that in our conversation today, it is amazing and great. People still buy from people. So if you go into a restaurant, you might have a great payment experience, but if the service is rubbish, you probably won't go back again. And that's because it's the people. It's all down to that people interaction. And I don't think it can be underestimated at the moment in any way, shape or form.
No, I totally agree. So just going back to the whole trying to attract people to your organization, can you just I suppose share some insights into what you believe, what the current state of the job market is, and why it's becoming challenging to attract, decent talent?
Yeah, so there's a phrase that we use quite a lot when we talk about it, about we're in a candidate short market, and really that means that there aren't enough candidates for the jobs that are out there. So I think it was last week or earlier in this week in the UK, the stats came out. Unemployment is at 4.2%, which is about 1.4 million people are registered unemployed, and yet there are over 1 million open job vacancies. So just from those two statistics alone, you can sort of get an understanding of there are not a greater number of roles out there. 1 million, it sounds a lot, but out of a population is probably not too great. And equally, you've got about the same number of people who are unemployed. So when you're looking for talent and you're looking to attract people, there is choice out there. People have the opportunity to go and be choosy and perhaps not be as flamboyant in their choices as they may have been in the future. So we're definitely seeing that attracting people is becoming more and more difficult because there's more choice. So you've got to be different to everybody else. whilst you're looking for those new talents, new skills, and wanting to drive that business forwards.
So, obviously it puts the power in the candidate's perspective, doesn't it? In terms of there's more opportunities and they know that they're wanting to be attracted, and therefore the upper hand's with them. So, from your experience and working with companies, what sort of things can we start to think about doing in terms of strategies to start to, I guess, firstly, start to attract the talent, to start to create that engagement? And what have you found to be quite effective?
Yeah, really, it's around the company brand. So we're always talking about brand, be it a personal brand or a trend or whatever it might be, but a company brand of why that business is a good place to work. It is absolutely critical, because if you, in today's society, it's so easy to check out the brand, is check out the way in which that organization has been scored by the people who may be still there or who have left. So it's around getting the employee brand out. And today it's around values. It's around having within your employer brand things that people can resonate to. So around sustainability, perhaps around the environment, around working in the community, or being innovative. So it's not always around some of the ecological statements. It's also around being innovative, excitement, opportunities for learning. Those sorts of values really do resonate with people now, and that can be the difference between accepting job with company A or the job with company B. It's the subjective things that aren't necessarily in the job contract or the salary that people go, well, if I'm going to spend 8 hours a day, for the sake of arguments, working for these people, I want something else other than just the money in the bank at the end of the month. So employer brand and being able to position that in a way that reinforces what you're trying to do as a business, but also works on your values as an organization are key, because without those, you basically are going to get looked over before anybody actually looks into you as an organization for that role.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that salary and benefits in some ways are just sort of hygiene factors.
Yeah,
that's the expectations, and people are looking for so much more than that in an organization. Talking about the values, talking about mission, purpose, and all those sort of areas which create the excitement, engagement, and the sort of wanting to be part of something, to contribute to something that's bigger than just the job they do. What have you found in your experience? Have you got an example where either personally in an organization you worked in or ones you've been working with, that how they've gone about this branding piece? Because it's not just making a nice sort of website with lots of talk about ESG or innovation or values. There's far more than that, isn't there?
Yeah, I think we did some work with a manufacturing company a while back who it wasn't the most exciting of businesses to work in, but they had a talent issue. They had a shortage that they needed to fulfill. One of the things that we started to do was to harness social media in a positive way, but to share experiences and stories of the people who were working there. And it went from people who may have been there for 25, 30 years to somebody who's only been there 3 months. So having the different insights from people who were on that journey with that organization at different times became very powerful. So those advocates, ambassadors for the business, if you like, those stories actually, you always want it to have a positive spin, because that makes perfect sense, but don't sugarcoat it. So if there are things we were working with that were not necessarily at the end of the process to be amazing, be honest about it. If we're working on this is what I'm working on. And one of the things we talked about was increasing the speed of the customer journey. So because it wasn't particularly good to start with, and they're honest about it. We're in this journey to get it better. Come and join us, make it better, help us develop this. So that actually then resonates with people, because there's a level of transparency and truth, but there's also a piece around realism and hearing what people actually think. But also, when you go into that interview process, is to be able to reinforce the messages that you put out in the public domain need to be demonstrated when people come to have that interview or a site visit or whatever it may be. Because otherwise you're saying it's a marketing spiel versus reality. So it's that consistency. And that worked really well. And then to actually, as part of the interview process or the selection process, is for them to be able to, candidates to talk to people who are doing the jobs and get the warts and all, maybe not too many of the warts, but certainly a good selection of the good and the challenges that you can face when you come and join it, and be honest about it. And I think that's becoming more and more prevalent today, because recruiting people is expensive, not only for agency fees, but also lost productivity whilst you've got a gap. If you sell a dream and then they arrive and it's actually a nightmare, those individuals will leave quite quickly, and therefore you've lost more time and effort and money than you perhaps should be. So honesty is quite good. So those real life interactions has been quite powerful, and you see quite a lot of organisations now you doing those through meet the team, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, and I think social media has certainly opened that up more, and I know more and more people will not just check out the website, they'll check out the people who work there on LinkedIn, they'll see what they post, they'll check out other social media sort of platforms. And it's interesting because I worked with a company a few years ago, and I interviewed the CEO on my podcast, which is another good way of, like you're doing, of exposing who you are as an individual, your values, people get to know you. And it got a huge amount of hits, certainly on the YouTube side of things. And it was interesting because when they were interviewing people, he wasn't directly involved in some interviews. People had already watched that interview and understood a bit more about the company, the values from this guy who was the CEO. And it's an interesting one. And I thought that's quite powerful, actually, is doing more and more that, is getting on podcasts, sharing a bit more of that personal side. So I think often companies get caught up with using their sort of branded page on LinkedIn as opposed to their personal page. And it goes back to what we start at the very start. People buy people. They don't buy brands as such. They buy the people, don't they?
Absolutely. And certainly you see that through communication internally with organizations. Sometimes it's far more powerful for a quick business update video from the leader, the MD, on the train into the office to say, this is the latest sales stats. Well done, everybody. That's great. And just put it out on, taking it on his phone or her phone, rather than having a polished corporate video. That can be more powerful because they've taken the time to do that. And that then, just as you rightly say, adds that human element to everything, that people go, this is a people-centric organization. They're real people. And do I think I will fit in there from my personality, etc. So these are all positive ways of increasing that attraction to an organization. And as I said, it doesn't need to be movie standard production necessarily. It needs to have the right messages and look good, but it doesn't need to be high quality in that sense. So, and people are searching, that they will do their research before they turn up. And again, we're seeing now, interestingly, is that a lot of organizations are starting to provide information as part of the selection process of topics they want to discuss. So it's preempting some of the questions and giving people the time to really think about what they can add the value to or whatever, rather than it just being a straightforward surprise question and you're having to think on your feet, because the new Generation Z don't work in that way. So again, it's being flexible. So slightly off the point of that attraction, but it's about being more candidate focused than perhaps people were in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's still, I think it's still part of attraction, because that attraction piece is not just the sort of the branded, the social media, the external piece, is also when people then interact with the organization. That's all, because it's still attraction until they say yes, they're going to join you. And in some ways, the element of continuous creating advocates in your business, that you'll then talk about how great this business is and how great the people are, which will attract even more, because that's like a snowball effect. When you know an organization is doing really well, the organization's people will start to pull people in because they want people to work there, because it's great. So getting to that point of the process, when people do get to that interview and that whole, what sort of things should a hiring manager think about at that point? Because it's still in the attraction phase, isn't it?
Yeah, it's being clear what you want that role to do, and that's the first thing, is what is it you actually want that role to do, and what type of skills do you need in order to facilitate that. And that's really important. So it's that match of skills versus requirement. But then to take it one step further, certainly in a candidate short market, of are there things that we really would like, that if we find somebody who we think could do the job with some support, some training, what are we willing to do to invest in that person to get them to where we may want them, rather than not have anybody in that role. So that is a different way of thinking about it. So what are the mandatory things that you have to be able to do, but what are the things that perhaps you could learn, or you could be taught over a period of time, that if you're not an immediate fit, you will be in 6 months, because you have to have a little bit more flexibility in your thought process. The other part is around that whole candidate experience, when they from the moment that they send the CV in, or the application form, through to the interview process, and then to the offer process. All of those needs to be really streamlined. And the piece that I'm an advocate for is those who you turn down need to be treated in the same way as those who you take through to each stage of the process. There's nothing more frustrating than being able to send in an application form and hear nothing. And that then has a negative brand effect to you as an organization. So being able to, and automation and AI and all these systems now make that much easier, but to treat everybody in a way that they are updated and feel involved, even if it's bad news and they haven't got any further, that is a positive interaction with an organization, rather than it just being, I've sent stuff in, I don't hear about it. But with the people you do take through, to make it as quick as possible, not just lengthy delays, and key is not to rearrange stuff, which people's diaries are very busy, but actually you need to commit to this. And we see this quite often with some of our clients, of that they're all over it for recruiting, and then something comes into the diary and they just change everything, and therefore you've lost days or weeks or whatever it might be. So it's really mapping out what you want to do and sticking to your timeline, and then treating people with respect.
And it's coming from a mindset that's not arrogance, that we've got this role and aren't we amazing that you can come and work for us. It's changing it, not as a completely, we need people, we're desperate, but more of a mindset. I want to attract people, I want to attract good people to this business, rather than an arrogance, and then treating people. And I think that experience piece, I think, is often forgotten about. It becomes very process driven, and actually we're dealing with human beings that more matter about how you make them feel, rather than what you've even said to them, to be honest. And I think that's what we need to think more about, is this experience, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also around understanding what you need, but also having an open mind, that when you do talk to somebody, you go, oh, actually, I hadn't thought about maybe doing it that way. So maybe I need to change what we're looking for a little bit because I've not thought of it that way. So it's an iterative process. It's not necessarily being, I need a blue square block to go into this wall. It's actually, I might be able to get away with a rectangle because I've not thought about that before. So it's about being flexible on both sides. And often, we see people that aren't quite what we're looking for when we're working with a client. But then you go, actually, they've got something else. So you're looking for something else as well. So can we perhaps change what we're looking for a little bit, and then get a good person? And we need to rearrange what we're going to be recruiting for as an organisation.
And it almost comes down to this whole view of recruiting for more attitude versus skill. Right. I appreciate we need elements of skill to do certain roles. Have you got an example where you worked with a company where they had a fixed role sort of process, what they wanted in mind, but actually ended up tweaking it or slightly changing it?
Yeah, in some of the data-driven businesses, at times it can be very, and which is industry specific, can be very difficult for people to be able to separate industry knowledge and skills, and they're looking for, we would call it the unicorn person, that there's probably only 4 in the world who can do this role. You employ 2 of them, and the other 2 used to work for you, but you annoyed them that much they left. That's where we've had a couple of those, and we worked with a business earlier in the year which was in that mindset, and it was really took a period of time for them to understand that they needed to give up on something. They needed to have a level of flexibility in what they were looking for, otherwise they wouldn't have filled the role. And the key thing there was that they'd spent over a year waiting for somebody to come into this job. So then you can have a very different conversation. So if you've waited a year for somebody and you've still continued to manage it, are you looking for the right person? So what can we do to tweak it? So it goes back to really being that flexibility again. If we've got somebody with 80% of the skills and 80% of the experience, can we teach them the remaining 20% that you really want? And that took some time to get there. In the end, they went, yeah, maybe we need to give this a shot. And the person they recruited wasn't as effective as perhaps the business might have thought they would have been on day one. But over a period of time, that effectiveness and contribution increased because that person grasped and understood the skill sets, because they chose somebody who had the ability and the desire to learn. So therefore they won. But it took them about 18 months to fill that role.
That's a long time. I mean, I know recruitment, anywhere from 3-6 months is sort of normal, but 18 months is a long time. And I know years ago, I was recruiting for somebody. I was quite specific on the role. I wanted the skills. It was quite a senior role. And somebody came to me and the recruiter convinced me to see this person. I was like, I'm not so sure. They didn't quite have the experience I wanted. But when I saw them, it was the attitude piece. They had the huge amount of ability to learn. And they had some transferable skills that were valid as well. And actually, took a risk. It wasn't a risk as such, but I sort of shifted myself, and actually it proved to be actually quite a positive hire. And they actually brought a lot more than somebody who'd been more honed into that area, actually, because they came from a different perspective. And so that was really quite helpful to have that sort of shift sometimes. And I think when we start seeing candidates, I think we've got to start sort of shaping our mind. We've got some core things, I think, to think about, but actually being a bit more flexible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's being flexible, but it's also you've got to stay true to what you want as well, to a level of extent from a business perspective. You can't just give everything away, but there has to be. It's like any sales scenario. There's a negotiation on both sides, and perhaps that's the way of looking at it. Of the individual negotiating what they can do and what they can't do, and you need to negotiate on what you are requiring and what you will live without for a period of time. And if you can get to an amicable solution, then why wouldn't you give it a shot? Because they're committing to it as well. And if they are lacking in a skill set that you think is important, or is to be honest about that conversation. We really want to work with you, but you need to commit that this this level of skill that you can't yet demonstrate, that you're going to commit to with our support to learn, to develop in. And as long as you've got that two-way agreement and two-way commitment, then I think you're probably better off hiring 85% of the right person and teaching the remaining 15% than not having anybody in that role for a period of time, because you can't find the unicorn.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And as we sort of look ahead, and sort of, I guess, what are sort of the trends that you foresee in the recruitment landscape, and how can businesses prepare and navigate for those sort of challenges ahead?
I think that a lot of businesses need to start taking the viewpoint that when they recruit, certainly when they recruit Generation Z, and I know, previous podcast you were talking about to manage and engage with Generation Z. People need to understand that commitment for life, or that commitment for 10, 15 years of working in an organization, isn't going to be there per se going forwards. So it's almost planning. You recruit, and then you need to start thinking, what if that person leaves, and what if we do something else? Is to be a little bit more proactive going forwards, to actually have that understanding that, the way that I always looked at it when we recruit people is, if I get 2 years out of an individual, that would have repaid my effort, my recruitment cost, and that individual should have delivered value to that business. If they stay longer, then that's great, that's brilliant. But as long as they stay for a 2-year period, and it's an arbitrary number, then I'm okay with that, because they've committed, we've committed, and off you go. I think organizations need to really understand that they're not going to have that job for life mentality anymore, and that they need to constantly be thinking about the what if. So if we lost this person, what would I do? And it's that resource planning, contingency planning that the businesses need to think about on the people side, and not only on the IT or the premises side, or perhaps on the sales side. It's about the people side, and that needs to be coming far more into your overall business planning and risk assessments going forwards as well.
Yeah, it's been proactive in terms of organizational design, isn't it? What are where you're going as a business? What people do you need? What resources people do? Where are people at in terms of their talents, in terms of their own development, their own stage of their career? And it's you can't guess everything, but as you say, almost the what if scenarios.
Yeah.
And I used to always like when people did leave, hopefully left for a positive reason, it always represented an opportunity for me to think about differently, rather than just replace somebody directly. Actually, is there a way of doing things differently here? And I always thought, could we change that role? Could we move things around? And I think it's thinking that way as well, is it? Not always just, we've had somebody in A and therefore they will replace an A, but actually somebody in a B might be more appropriate now for our business.
Absolutely. And it's about, it's a much wider conversation around company culture and how you treat people, and the way in which you behave as leaders, middle leaders, or whatever. Because you need to then retain the talent, which is is very much related, but it's a different conversation to some extent. But you need to be true to what you sold them at interview. And it always goes back to one of the questions I always ask when we recruit, after the 3-month probation review or the 6-month review, one of the questions I always ask is, so what I sold you at interview, is that actually reality? And if I get more or less you were spot on, then that's great. If they go, no, it's completely different, then I've failed as a recruiter, because I've sold them something that wasn't reality. Now, sometimes you sell them something that turns out differently for business reasons. That can be a positive. But really, from an integrity point of view, I think you need to be selling the skill, the role, and the organization. And that when they arrive and when you have that update conversation, 80% of it is true, then actually you've done a good job. And if they stay, then they've accepted it as well. So you've done everything that you possibly can.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Well, thank you for your insights, Ian. It's been great to have a conversation of how to attract best talent. I think it's certainly a challenge, and it's a challenge that's not going away. And I think companies need to think a bit more about certainly the experience, about personal branding as well as that whole being more flexible in terms of how they sort of suit roles within that organization, and just having a different mindset. If people want to engage with you, get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Best way is very active on LinkedIn. Alternatively, you can check us out at lodgecourt.com, or if you want to drop me an email, that's ian@lodgecourt.com. I'd be delighted to share people's feedbacks and their own experiences of attracting talent, because this is why this podcast is so great. Sharing information, sharing knowledge and experiences, and be great to see whether anything's resonated or perhaps people got great innovative ideas that we can collaborate and use as well. So that'd be really cool.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time today.
You're welcome, Julian. Good to see you as ever.